I wanted to share something with you that God is doing with me right now. I'm at that point where I'm so up against the wall that at any given moment I can pop back into my flesh and get really freaked out about what's going on. And the nighttime is really difficult for me. I think because I've been pushing so hard during the day, at night my resources are just down, and I start to just think another day down, and I don't know what's going to happen, and I start to want to control things, and there's nothing to control. So tonight I'm sitting here journaling, and I'm calling out to God, and I'm sorting it through with him. And he started to remind me of when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he was praying for God to take this cup, but only if he was willing, only if it was his will. Otherwise, he would endure it. And I started to really understand what that means. And the difference between me and Jesus is that I have a covenant I have to work out. He didn't, at least not for his sake. He didn't have a covenant that he had to work out because he was sinless, and no one else has that situation. And so I've told you many times that I know that God's using me as an offering here, but it's not the same offering as Jesus. Jesus was withholding from himself this entire time, and he was pushing and leaning in, and he finally gets to this point where he says, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And he's pushing to do this last thing that he's got to do after an entire lifetime of withholding from himself. It's not the same as us. That's not the same as us at all. It's what's required of us to keep pushing, but it's not the same as us. I haven't withheld from myself all my life. I've withheld for a few years, and that's been a lot. And the word says, going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, falling to the ground and praying, my Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. And then he returns to the disciples, and he finds that they're sleeping. They're not even standing. And he says, couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. And then listen to what he says. He says, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. This is an understanding that must have needed he must have needed that understanding that entire time that he was here in order to stand, in order to withhold from himself. And it's such powerful wisdom right there, that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. You can't live in the flesh if you're going to stand in this way. And I started to realize, and am sitting here realizing how important it is for us to live in the Spirit by his Spirit, the Spirit he gave us that comes from him, that's willing to do the things of God, and the Spirit that is his, that he's placed inside of us, that enables us to do the will of God. But you have to push in the Spirit. We can't push in the flesh. And those are the moments where I start to have difficulty, is when I'm trying to push in the flesh, when I'm trying to bide my time or distract myself as though something's going to happen because time has passed. God has always told me that it's not about time. It's not a matter of time. He has always told me that he will relent when the lesson has been learned. And so that's what he's showing me this evening, is what Jesus went through and how he pushed in the Spirit his entire life here, and that I need to keep pushing in the Spirit and be willing to do whatever it is that the Father requires of me, to drink of whatever cup the Father has set apart for me. And Jesus must have been going through agony thinking about what was ahead of him. 3 times he prayed to the Father. And in Luke, in the version that is found in Luke, it says, in being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Poor Jesus. I just think about all of the times that I've taken him for granted and thought, well, he was the Son of God. Or people who say, well, I'm not Jesus, I can't do this, and act like he was some sort of superhuman. He was a man. The Son of God, yes, but he came here as a man in the same condition that all of us are in, being in anguish. He prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. And even in that moment, he's telling the apostles, Get up and pray so you won't fall into temptation. Get into the Spirit. The Spirit's willing, the flesh is weak. Don't fall into the flesh. I just wanted to share that with you because I know we all take him for granted. And this is just such a powerful understanding that God is giving me right now to really understand the sacrifice, the offering of Jesus, and how I need to stand in the offering that he has set me apart to provide. Whatever it means, whatever is contained in it, that I need to stand, that I need to be in the Spirit and lean in by the Spirit. And the book of Luke says in verse 43 of this chapter 22, an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. God will hear our call if this is where we're at. If we're in the flesh and we're just crying out to him in desperation and wanting him to change everything, and we're not rending our heart to what he wants, it's going to be a very different situation. But he will respond when we're rending our heart to him. When we have love for him, he's going to respond with love for us. I'm just so struck with humility over the posture that Jesus had with the Father, that it was never about him. You don't hear him doing this in any other chapter. And even as he was on the cross, Father, why have you forsaken me? He must have been suffering so much. And so as much as I'm suffering right now, I know that the word tells me that he's able to help us. Having been tempted in every way, having come here and lived in the same condition that we're in, he's able to help us. And I feel really humbled by that, and I feel really grateful as I'm waiting for God to do what it is that he's going to do. And it's not just me learning. I know he's waiting for others as well. I know at the same time that he's not going to hold things up for me in terms of putting me in a bad situation, but I might have to endure a little longer for others to come in and to be an offering for them. Like, I don't know, my realtor, maybe my realtor has to go through a few more things to, try to do this by the work of his hands in order to be able to see the miracle that God's going to perform, that he's going to achieve, so that the realtor doesn't think that this was somehow by the work of his own hands, because I've stayed firm. I have not wavered at all. Not even like, I'm in a bad situation. I haven't even told him that. He doesn't even know I'm in a bad situation. He has absolutely no idea. He will. When God reveals his glory, I'm going to show him how serious this was and that I stood in faith anyway, because I want that to be for God's glory. I want him to be able to know that those who know God are able to do that, that I believe in God that much, because he sent me a message the other day saying, you call it prayer, I call it manifesting. And I just, it just highlighted the fact that, first of all, those are not the same things. One is God, the other is the work of your hands. It just made me realize how much he needs to see the glory of God. So maybe this takes a little bit longer for that. Maybe it takes a little longer for somebody else. But he's going to be faithful to me at the end of the day. So I'm finding a lot of comfort in Jesus' example, and also inspiration to keep going, to do just a little speck of what Jesus did for us in order for God's glory to be revealed.